Welcome back to another session of Better Podcasting Chats with me. I'm SP. This is a streamed and recorded casual conversation with other hobby and passion podcasters to share their experience, knowledge, enthusiasm, and joy of podcasting. Better Podcasting is a project by Stephen John Drew and myself to help hobby and passion podcasters start their podcasts and make their existing projects better. That's why we came up with the name. It's even on my shirt, Better Podcasting. It is our hope that bringing on new voices from hobby and passion podcasting spaces with different viewpoints will help other podcasters just as much as listening to Stephen and myself. That is why I created this show. Thank you to Ashley Hamer from the Taboo Science podcast and to Script for joining me in the previous chat. You can check Ashley out at her show at tabooscience.show. To demonstrate what a hobby or passion podcast is, just in case you don't know, for the next few moments, I'm going to talk about my passion space. So this is just an example. Since I recorded last time during a joint meeting of the U.S. National Academy's Aeronautics and Space Engineering Board and its Space Studies Board on Wednesday, June 7th, NASA Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, Jim Free, said regarding Artemis 3's Starship lunar lander, that December 25th, quote, is our current manifest date, but with the difficulties that SpaceX has had, I think that's really, really concerning. So you can think about that slipping probably into 26. If you figure they need a number of launches to do their depot for our crewed flight, they need a number of launches to do the demo, they need a number of launches just to get flying. They have a significant number of launches to go, and that, of course, gives me concern about the December of 2025 date, unquote. Meanwhile, SpaceX is racing to make repairs and improvements to their Boca Chica Starship orbital launch platform and are making preparations for a Starship 25 static engine test fire as early as tomorrow, June 14th, 2023. In an earlier tweet today, Elon Musk said the next Starship test would be in, quote, 6 to 8 weeks, unquote. However, Elon time has been known to be shortened by as much as a quarter of the time in reality. Meanwhile, Boeing continues to have major issues with its Starliner astronaut capsule, currently on contract with NASA for a total of 7 crewed flights to the International Space Station. Boeing is standing down from the first ever crewed launch of its Starliner astronaut capsule for NASA, possibly indefinitely. It's due to safety issues with the spacecraft's parachutes and wiring that were discovered last week. The Starliner's astronaut launch, already years behind schedule, was most recently targeted to launch 2 NASA astronauts to the International Space Station on July 21st. Now, it likely won't launch at all this summer and may not get off the ground in 2023. 2 major safety issues are driving the latest delay, both of them discovered last week during in-depth reviews of Starliner to certify spacecraft for crewed flight. First, Boeing engineers discovered that the soft links used on the suspension lines of Starliner's 3 parachutes, the 3 main parachutes, have a failure load limit that is actually lower than previously thought. Turns out that those links, which secure the parachute lines with their anchor tethers on the capsule, cannot handle the load of Starliner if one chute fails. Being able to land safely with 2 of the 3 chutes is a safety requirement for NASA, especially with astronauts on board. The second safety issue Boeing found pertains to the protective tape covering the wiring harnesses throughout the Starliner capsule. That tape is flammable, and there are hundreds of linear feet inside Starliner, and in case you don't know, fire inside a space capsule is very, very bad. So this is an indefinite hold and possibly even a complete hold. I don't know if Starliner is ever going to launch. It probably will, and I wish the Boeing team well, but this is a major, major setback. All right, so hobby passion podcasters all podcast from the viewpoint that I just did because we emphasize the fun, the dedication, and passion to podcasting. So if you podcast like that, you're going to be just fine with your audience. Now, for the next hour, I'm chatting with a Russian literature lover and hobby podcaster. His name is Matt Gerasimovich, and he co-hosts the Tipsy Tolstoy podcast with his friend Cameron. Matt is a PhD student in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at Northwestern University. His research focuses on Russia, avant-garde literature, and the relationship between politics and aesthetics. In 2018, Matt studied in St. Petersburg and met his co-host Cameron. They started the show in December 2020 and currently have produced 79 numbered episodes with at least an additional 10 bonus episodes. Welcome to the chat, Matt.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, Matt. I really appreciate you joining here. And I've never read any Tolstoy, but I gather you probably read it multiple times.
Yes, I have read so much Tolstoy, it sometimes makes my skin crawl just to think about.
Well, in a good way, I suppose.
I suppose, yeah. But, that's all right. Our podcast is filled with people who have never read any Russian literature at all. And we are their very first introduction, which is always a treat.
That's awesome, actually, because people are probably wondering what's all about this stuff, and you can tell them.
Yeah, we get a lot of these lifelong kind of readers that are always kind of interested in learning about new things, and we kind of try to grab them and pique their interest a little bit, best we can.
What inspired you to start podcasting to begin with?
I think our podcast is one of these sort of pandemic podcasts. This kind of boom that emerged as we were all sitting home doing nothing. And a lot of it was born out of my desire just to do something with my friend, Cameron, my co-host, who lives in California. I live outside of Chicago. And I said, hey, what should we do with our free time? Let's do a lot of work. Let's do a bunch of work and, regularly produce this podcast. And so it has been a great 3 years of working, changing, learning everything that we know now about podcasting. And it's been a great way to stay in touch, but also it's really fun to take something that I do professionally and hone in on these questions that I study and really push myself to think why is it interesting? Why does it matter? And try to convey that to other people.
Have you ever brought up podcasting in an academic conference?
Not in an academic conference, I have not, but I do have people in my department that are, aware of the podcast. It's kind of a novelty because normally us academics, we write for, 20 or 25 people maximum to read our work. Whereas now I have an established audience that listens regularly, which is bigger than 20 or 25. Great. We're grateful for that.
Yeah, okay. So you got 21 or 26 listeners out there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I know how that goes. Yeah, as far as listeners, the average podcast gets about 150 listeners, give or take, whatever. And in your case, that's at least 6 classrooms, if not more. So yeah, that's a full-time job right there. Just if you get the average amount of listeners. We
do normally, if you're curious, I'll say on our lower end episodes in first maybe 2 weeks or so, we'll do around 300, which is pretty good. Bigger series, we're pushing up above 1,000. Your War and Peace, Anna Karenina, things that people have heard of and are really searching for. And that's what we kind of drag in a lot of our new listeners off of. But for me, as somebody who is kind of working in this university space, I do kind of think about it like that because I think, wow, I could fill a giant classroom with the amount of people that I have listening to the podcast. And it feels really rewarding when I think about it like that.
Yeah, no, when I was presenting academic papers and projects, I would present to these conferences and there'd be hundreds of people in the audience at AIAA conferences or something. You and I are in 2 different academic realms because I'm more on the technical side, you're more the soft sciences side. But it's the same basic thing that you're presenting to your peers at these conferences. And I get to do it every week on my shows. So It's amazing the amount of people that you're able to touch all over the world. It doesn't have to be in a classroom or in an auditorium. It's anywhere they are in the entire world.
It's really wonderful. We've had people email us just saying I love your show so much. I started reading more and now I'm writing my undergraduate thesis based on something that I read because of your podcast, or your podcast really helped me. We had one person say it really helped them kind of formulate their idea for their master's thesis, which is amazing. And we love when people write us these things because I think at the core of it, that's the kind of thing that keeps us going. It's nice to make some money and cover your costs and do whatever you have to do. But at the core of it, it is really building that sort of community of listeners that kind of propel you to continue on with it.
In addition to everything we just talked about, what else excites you about podcasting?
So I kind of am someone who really likes to fixate on, kind of individual things one at a time. And podcasting has allowed me to channel this sort of fixation into a productive cycle where I can say, okay, this week I am going to redesign our website and I'll get really into kind of the technicals of our website. Or, this week, this month, I'm going to take a look at our Patreon and update our tiers and do this kind of thing. And so for me, it's kind of this constant sort of learning that I get to do with the podcast, because obviously, as we are all hobby podcasters, this is not usually the full-time thing that we're doing. So I have only so many hours per week or per month that I'm able to give. And I get to continue spending it learning something that I'm not really doing on my day-to-day basis, but that I do enjoy doing. So I would say outside of this, building this sort of community of listeners, my favorite part so far has been just learning. You can probably tell that's a bit of a trend with me, but I do enjoy finding these, different avenues that we're expected to be sort of proficient in as podcasters, and just really trying to master something for a week until it, evolves past the time that I have to give it.
I think that's attributable to a large portion of hobby podcasters. There's some people that just do it for the fun of it, but there's a lot of people that do it to learn all the aspects of podcasting, like you said. And as we were discussing before we started hitting the record button here, is that podcasting has evolved significantly just in the last few years. I would say last 2-3 years, and not necessarily because of the pandemic, but that probably didn't hurt the evolution of some of the digital tools that we use and services that we use. But I would say, and we've been talking about it even pre-pandemic, there was an evolution in podcasting before that in like the 2017 to 2019 timeframe too. Mm-hmm. So there have been so many innovations in podcasting that it both makes it easier and takes some of the hobby aspects out of it. Because back in the day, I used to have this just cords everywhere and the setup that was made to do what I wanted it to do, to multi-track record, but it was using stuff that wasn't meant to do that. And now I have a simple Rodecaster Pro 2 on my desk that does everything like $2,000 worth of gear used to do. And granted, it's not that cheap. It's still around $650, $700, but it is cheaper than $2,000, and it's a lot smaller, and I don't have to worry about all the cords. I don't have to worry about tracking down a cord that's gone bad. I don't have to worry about like 10 machines on my desk, not 10 machines, but like 3 or 4 machines to connect to different people to be able to multi-track through different Skype sessions. That's all handled through StreamYard for us right now. There are many other ways to do this, but I use StreamYard, and that's a revolution in itself, is that you can use many services to do multi-track recording and podcast with somebody that's geographically separated from you at a decent quality. So yeah, all great stuff. I love it, but it's constantly learning a new thing. Like I had to learn how to use StreamYard. For kids and people in college these days, it might not be that difficult, but for 50-year-olds, you got to learn how to do it.
Well, the change too from just pure audio to the addition of video content, and also in tandem with that stream content as well, is definitely a big new part of podcasting for sure.
I'm a moderator on the R podcasting subreddit, and we won't go into what's currently going on Reddit right now. But over there, I would say in the last couple of months, especially, but it's been evolving over the last year or so, as people come to ask questions about how to set up their podcast in a video format. And what they're really referring to is a stream like on Twitch or YouTube or something like that. But they're calling it a podcast because that's what the popular lexicon is. There's a technical definition to podcasting. What they're doing is not the technical definition, but it doesn't matter because they, in their mind, are podcasting, and it's video based. Gotta say, unfortunately, it is more expensive to do a video podcast than a regular podcast, regular audio podcast, but that seems to be the way everybody wants to go. And I'm not going to say no. I will say that there are a lot of benefits to being off camera in an audio only show. Editing's a lot easier. You don't have to worry about the camera aspect or thousands of dollars in camera gear if you're not using your cell phones. And it's just a lot of extra time as well. Audio podcasts are a dream in comparison.
Yeah, we did think about doing video. We trialed probably maybe 8 to 10 episodes of video. And I don't mean just uploading our FLAC or MP3 with a waveform or something over it, like, like you do here with real video. And we ended up moving away from it. It was just too much time, and we weren't able to kind of get the process down right for the way that we wanted it to come out. But more power to people that are able to pull it off and repurpose the content and get it across all of social media. But it ended up being a little bit too much for us.
Yeah. So you mentioned constantly learning about podcasting. At the start, how did you learn how to podcast?
I just looked things up online. I read everything I could possibly find about podcasting. I went through r/podcasting on the subreddit, just narrowing down equipment and the technology that I thought I would need. But fortunately, my co-host has a background in radio, so that was super easy. And the setup that you see now, I just say, "Hey, what do you use for this?" And he tells me, and I say, "Oh, I'm going to go do my own research and see what I can find." And usually, it's come down. He's picked something very good, so I've kind of stopped doing my own research on audio equipment, and I'll just take a suggestion from my co-host. But not everybody has this luxury, I get. But yeah, so at the start, it was really just trying to get anything that was freely available and good information, and not trying to sell you a bunch of affiliate link crap that you don't need, but trying to figure out, what is essential, what is going to let me do what I want to do with my show. And eventually now it's kind of, I would say, more peer-to-peer learning, just talking with other podcasters that are close to our size or bigger or have been around longer than us. And that now has been more helpful for where we're at, for sure.
Do you, since you've been learning and you've been around podcasting space for a few years, do you know the origin of why the Blue Yeti was such a huge microphone for the new podcasters with podcasting space?
I don't know if there's a specific thing you're referring to. I just imagine being able to plug it in is easier. That was my very first microphone I had since like middle school, and I used it when we started for about 5 episodes before I decided to upgrade. But
yeah, we'll talk about your upgraded equipment in a second, but yes, ease of use was definitely one of them, where you could plug it in via USB and you could be ready to go without any other gear on board. That was definitely one of the things, but there were other USB microphones like the Audio-Technica 2100, which may have been better for a lot of people because it's a dynamic microphone versus the condenser microphone. And don't get me wrong, condenser microphones are really good, but they are really, really good in that they pick up most of the things from your ambient space, whether that's reverb or the sirens in the background, dogs barking in the background, scratching at the door, whatever, kids bouncing in the floor above or below you. Those all tend to get picked up a little bit more from the condenser microphone. So instead of going to the Audio-Technica 2100 quicker, a lot of people were using the affiliate links from the Blue Yeti, and then that just snowballed. It's kind of a fun term to use with Blue because there's the Blue Snowball microphone as well, but it snowballed into, this is the best microphone to start podcasting. And while it was easy, as you said, so was an Audio-Technica ETR 2100, which might have been better for a lot of people. So the affiliate links really, in the early stages of podcasting, really drove what gear to use. And to this day, there is gear that is not recommended by consultants in the industry because they can't get affiliate links to it, whether it's service or a gear or something like that. So the affiliate links with consulting within podcasting have really driven what the mainstream people use in podcasting. So as a history lesson, there you go. You might be interested in history. I don't know.
That's fun. I didn't know that, but that seems about right.
Yeah. So you're using the same microphone that I am, which is the Electro-Voice RE320. Is that correct? Or is it the
That's
RE20?
Yep.
Okay. RE320. And you've got it on the mount that Electro-Voice has, that 309A mount. And you have a Rode. Is it a PSA 1 arm?
I believe it is. Yes.
Okay. And that microphone goes into a audio interface?
Yes. This is going into my Audient.
Oh,
interface that I've got going, and that's also wired somehow. I've forgotten how into an Atom amp that I have to
oh.
drive my headphones, which I'm not really sure if it's necessary, but I like it. And I can feel like a fun tech guy with all my gadgets on my desk. As far as podcasters go, I'm definitely not the most savvy with the tech aspect of all of the different things. I like to just kind of go on YouTube and listen to people talk, do like talking tests between different microphones and try to find people who have like my kind of voice and see how they sound on different microphones. That was the best kind of tip that I've found so far. And I can't remember the other like main podcasting microphone, but I much prefer the sound of the Electro Voice to that one when I was choosing.
So do you have the ID4 or the ID14 Audient?
I think it's the ID14, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty decent set of gear. I was introduced to it via Podcastage on YouTube, talking about YouTubes, and Andrew has done reviews of several different audio interfaces. I don't know if he's going to continue to do that or not, because he's said that other people do it much better than he does, but he did a round of really good interfaces, and it was one of the reasons that I chose the Motu M2 behind me to use as a dedicated audio interface. And it was used during the pandemic by my daughter for, remote teaching that she was doing. So it's a good piece of gear. I enjoyed using it. My son uses it as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was originally there's no reason for me to have this Audient. I was using the Scarlett Focusrite Solo perfectly fine until I was tinkering with chords, and all of a sudden I started getting this little bit of electric static in my recordings, and I was like, oh, maybe this is gone, because I had it for about a decade. And so I replaced it, and the static was still there. So I didn't solve my issue, but I do have a nice new piece of equipment, which is about how half of problem solving goes, I think, in the podcast world.
I would say so. I mean, you could do troubleshooting to isolate where the problem really is, but even with good gear, I would say if you're a podcaster, even a hobby podcaster, I would plan to refresh your gear every 3 to 5 years. And that does include your computer, which can get pricey.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my third microphone upgrade. I believe I was using the Audio-Technica 2020, I want to say.
Okay.
After the Blue Yeti, and this was all probably within the first 20 episodes. So we were kind of on a sort of quick ramp up for our gear, but I was just able to find a good deal on the microphone, really, and pick it up used in good condition, and it's been smooth sailing from there.
Yeah.
I think at this point, I don't know, maybe I would need to sound treat my room versus upgrading. I don't even know where I would go from here. I'm very happy with the quality that we get on our show.
Yeah, it sounds and you look great. You got the 3-point lighting going on. You
Sure.
got it going on as far as I'm concerned. You got it dialed in.
It's our vestige from video podcasting. I can at least have decent lighting when I go on other people's video podcasts. So that's good.
There you go. If you could have told yourself one thing to make it easier for yourself to start podcasting, like if you could take what you know now and go back to, say, the summer of 2020, what would you have told yourself to help you along?
That is a really good question. I kind of struggle with this one because I'm kind of a stubborn person. So even if I had some really good piece of advice, I don't know if I would have taken it at the time. I'm kind of one of these people that needs to learn from experience in trials and tribulations. But I think probably the biggest thing that I've learned from experience, and this was just recently, is really not to focus that much on your numbers, which sounds kind of dumb because it's a really clear metric that you can use to, track what you're doing, track your audience size, all this stuff. But this is kind of what got us into our video podcasting foray, which ended up in kind of a stressed out disaster for us. Was trying to make videos so that we can put it out on all of our platforms. Everyone's on TikTok. We got to get on TikTok. We've got to get on these platforms that we don't really use and don't really understand. And so that ended up being just a lot of work. And we didn't quite have, like I said, we didn't quite have the editing processes in place. So we were running like 2 simultaneous edits. We were each editing something and then trying to clip and repurpose. It was so much work, and it yielded basically zero benefit. because during that time, I think that our focus on the show drifted into some sort of other technical aspects on video and on marketing or advertising, which are all super important parts of your podcast. But if the show itself isn't there, you're not going to have anything to advertise. And that's what I started to find was I don't really like the way the show sounds compared to how it sounded maybe 10 episodes ago before we were doing video. And I like the show a lot more since we've stopped focusing on video. So I think that I would say really, you you don't need to worry about chasing numbers because for a lot of us, this is just, it's fun. It's great to make some money on the side, but it really is just fun.
Okay. So you mentioned a few things there. Let's talk about TikTok for a second, because I'm always interested to talk to TikTok. TikTok has been purported by a lot of, if you're around our podcasting, still a lot of people that come in there, a lot of social media marketers or promoters come in there. So you got to get on TikTok. And I'm like, well, really? Do you need to? Because the video content that you post is going to take longer to post. Plus, TikTok doesn't necessarily allow you to, the algorithm wants to keep you on TikTok. It doesn't want to spin you off into your own website for your podcast, wherever your podcast can be found. So what is your experience with TikTok?
Completely mixed. I think that we did have some people find us through TikTok. We definitely had some positive interactions. Just making kind of dumb little meme videos, we definitely had some success with their algorithm. But I think that it wasn't a platform that I personally enjoyed spending time on. And so obviously the content that I created for it was not it just wasn't the things that I wanted to be doing. And so as a result of that, it kind of, I would say, ended unsuccessfully. I think the thing that you point to there is absolutely correct in that people who say you need to be on this social media or that social media, they're working with the conception of what social media is that is outdated by this point. Social media is designed to suck as much time from you as possible. It's not designed to send you somewhere else. Even if you think about how affiliate marketing and product placement on social media works now, you can do everything in the app without ever leaving the app. They don't want you to leave the app. And so I think it is a little bit foolish to just assume I'm going to post some stuff on TikTok and it's going to go absolutely crazy. And I'm going to have thousands and thousands of new followers. Maybe you will. Maybe people have had some success with that. But for us, we found most people will either save our videos, like our videos. Maybe we'll get a comment if we're lucky. But they're largely moving on. They're swiping to what's next. Oh, that's funny. And I'm going to swipe. Even if they do make an effort to remember our name, maybe it disappears just in the swiping. And so I think that is, I would say, focus on the show before you focus on TikTok. Maybe if you have a lot of extra time, then sure. But I also found myself getting sucked into TikTok because, like I said, they're really psychologically designed to do that. So any of these short form video websites are just designed to keep you scrolling. And I found myself when I was on there just researching what is trending, what are people interacting with. I would find myself spending so much time doing that instead of just doing research for my show.
Yeah, I would say if you are doing a podcast, you have to make a choice on whether you want to concentrate on your podcast or whether you do really want to concentrate on a TikTok channel or a YouTube channel or an Instagram account. I think you have to make your choice on where you want to focus your content on. If you have a big enough team, say you have 4 hosts and 2 of them can deal with the social media while the other 2 deal with the actual production of the podcast, I think you're actually working with an issue that is symbiotic, basically. But if your sole goal is to have your podcast, and I don't have a problem if your sole goal is not your podcast. If you really want a successful TikTok channel, go for it. It's just really difficult as a hobbyist, as you pointed out, to do a TikTok channel. And everybody that I've talked to versus a TikTok channel that feeds into your podcast, that channels people into your podcast. Undoubtedly, if you do it successfully enough, you're going to get some low percentage of people that filter over, but you're not going to, I've seen people that have tens or hundreds of thousands of followers. I think that's what it's called on TikTok. I personally don't have a TikTok account, but I've heard stories of people that do that and they say, yeah, well, we get about a dozen followers from our podcast from it. I'm like, okay, So it sounds to me like you have two entities. You have a podcast and you have a successful TikTok channel, but you don't have both of them combined. It's not like one IP that's in concert with each other. So I'm glad that your experiences align to where I have been hearing. And I keep searching for that. Where am I wrong? and sadly, you didn't prove me wrong.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, social media doesn't really function as a funnel into your podcast. The way that we've been kind of told by others that it really should be working is more of a way for you to connect with your pre-existing audience. You might see some growth over there, but generally for us, I think the way that we are most likely spreading is word of mouth, which is the slowest, the most frustrating way to spread, but it's also the most reliable because I will definitely check something out that my friends recommend to me, but I'm pretty unlikely to stop on just a random sponsored podcast post on social media.
Where you find yourself in an interesting knit with literature and in Russian literature specifically, where have you found your best promotional opportunities?
Yeah, so the best promotional opportunities for us are just people kind of in the broader books community. We are the only podcast that I'm aware of that does Russian literature
Really?
like full time.
Wow.
Other podcasts cover some of the major books, but we cover things that are like real, deep cuts. We're not just doing Tolstoy, Golden Age, we're going into Soviet socialist realism and spending like long amounts of time on these books that people have kind of not really paid attention to, but we think they're, artistically deserving. And, at the moment we're trying to expand right outside of Russia to the general Slavic region just to kind of, show, right, Russia's not the only one that's producing interesting things in this region. And so that brings us further into our niche. There's nobody that's right that I'm aware of that's doing, Central Asian literature, for instance. That's not really something that I've seen. But so we have to start going back up the other way. We can't really branch out because there is no out for us. There's only kind of up. So yeah, I've found people that have done just kind of general books, classics, for instance. The illustrator who did our current artwork, she runs a bookstagram on Instagram that's very popular, and she has a YouTube channel that's kind of about reading and books. And when she did our cover art, we kind of had a good merging of followings that was helpful. There are some kind of just meme pages that we found, and those have been helpful. We've made some good connections with that. And then for me, because I work largely at the university level, and this is really not a giant, it's not a giant field. Everybody kind of knows each other. It's very comfortable for me to be able to reach out to people that I know personally or that I find on Twitter and just say, hey, I have this podcast. Do you want to come talk about something interesting that you're working on? And I'm able to drag some of their audiences along. And so it's kind of just a mashup of these kind of parts of audiences that end up overlapping with what we're trying to do. And so it's a constant battle trying to figure out, right, like trying to assess, right, does your audience have overlap? Like, would it be beneficial for both of our audiences to be exposed to each other? Or is it not really going to yield anything? So I would say the general community of podcasters that I've built along this road has been very helpful for me.
When you're trying to do collaborations with other podcasts, is it like a promo swap or you go on each other's show, or how does that work?
We are trying and interested in doing promo swaps, but I would say at the moment it's more inviting people on as guests or going on others as guests. And that has been really fun. We've had a lot of really fun guest episodes. The only problem with guest episodes is just they're much more time consuming to plan for us because we generally read something or watch something with our guests and then do this discussion. So it's kind of a lot of planning. Obviously, reading is involved, which is a little bit difficult to pitch to everybody, but usually that's the gist of the show people understand. But yeah, usually it is guesting on each other's podcasts, and that's what we have found to be good. We really we don't run ads on our show right now, even promo swaps. We've done some affiliate-based ads, but didn't really find them to be particularly helpful or profitable, and we just kind of felt like it was degrading the quality of the show. And so we're always very conscious about what we're putting on our show that's not the show, and trying to limit those unless we really see some either great value in it or we think it would be valuable for our audience, for instance. And so just trying to find a good balance of that.
We'll go back to monetization in a second, but you brought this point up a couple of times, so I'm just curious. I want to ask, since you are in academia, do you have to worry about certain academia IP or permissions when you're podcasting about the same thing that you're either teaching or writing about for your thesis?
Actually, really, no. I don't, because I work mostly on film. I can bring it in when it's necessary, but it's not something that I'm really working on day to day. What we do on the podcast ends up being things that I'm familiar with and have wanted to explore, but don't have time to formally explore, which is actually really beneficial for me because it just ends up being fun for me.
All right. Well, I know a lot of people that podcast somewhat in their industry have to ask permission from their employer, but I have not necessarily explored that same topic with somebody from academia. So that's pretty interesting. So you're not actually taking like lesson plans and then throwing them on your show. But if you did, you'd probably have to get permission, I'm thinking.
Yeah. The thing is, we don't really think of it as the sort of lesson plan just because we don't want it to feel like, a lecture.
Right.
Because podcasting is different than the classroom. And I think that that's what can kind of sort of get people interested in our topic, which is something that is thought of as being very dense, very difficult, very hard to approach if you don't know anything about it. And we kind of break it down and do it conversationally, and that makes it, I hope, fun. And I know for a fact that it at times can be interesting, for sure. And so I think that it's for us, it ended up being kind of a great niche to mix with podcasting.
Yeah. The whole tipsy part of your name probably lends itself to possibly drinking while you're discussing.
Yeah, usually we discuss with a beer in hand, so it's inherently a much more casual sort of atmosphere. It's not an angry professor lecturing you, yelling at you for not understanding all of the names and forgetting who's, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea. Like you're just relaxing at the bar, at the college bar or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the kind of atmosphere that we go for. I think somebody in one of our podcast reviews described it as you're listening in on a conversation with some of your friends from college. And that's kind of the general atmosphere that we strive to maintain.
Okay. So I said we go back to monetization. You talked about placing ads and not feeling the connection necessarily for your audience or for your topic, but you do monetize. You have a Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And then how is that going for you?
It's going phenomenally. We're doing over $300 a month on Patreon right now, which is very good, I believe, for a podcast our size. We're able to cover all of our costs. We're able to, right now, we're in the middle of a little bit of a rebrand sort of situation that we've got going on. Top government secret over here. But when we do, the stuff, we're able to pay people, which is wonderful because you can't be a good member of your artistic community and not pay artists or, try to nickel and dime people. Like, it's important for us that when we use music and when we are, hiring illustrators to work for us, that they're getting compensated fairly for the time that they're putting in. And so that is a wonderful way to use our money. I think, it sounds like a lot of money probably, but I don't know if we've actually profited on the podcast. We put all of it back into equipment, into art, into, trying new web hosting, buying new software. Like I said, we didn't start this with the intention of making a ton of money off of it. So it is kind of rewarding in its own way to spend the money on making the show better or, sort of artistically separating yourself from some of the other podcasts that are around you with your art or music or whatever else you kind of choose to do.
Yeah, I know another podcaster that's been on this show before, Damien, the DM. He does Aurelia Pod, which is a playthrough podcast, tabletop playthrough podcast. He throws any and all profits right into the art that helps with the playthrough with not only his players, but then to be able to post that online so people can really understand the characters or the maps of the places that he's playing in. So yeah, I would echo that from another podcasting perspective, that art is really, or add-ons to your show are really an addition worth it, basically.
Yeah, we also sell merch, but we've lost money on any merch we've ever done because the art usually costs a few $100 when we're getting designs done at the least, right? And so, we're not making that back on merch, but we like having merch because it makes people feel involved in our community. And it is really cool, the idea that people like what we're doing so much that they want to wear like our logo. That's really cool. And so I'm constantly trying to like tweak our merch and make sure it's nice and that we have fresh new designs and that we, have things in our store that people actually want. Just one dumb instance of me being dumb was, forever we were just selling the generic like Tipsy Tolstoy tea. And one day I had this genius idea, right? Our audience is 60% women. So why are we not selling like a crop top or, a different cut shirt? And now that's our best selling product. Still not
Nice.
making money back on it, but, like it's just a good way to kind of use the data that you have, understand your community, and, give them a product that they actually want and value.
Do you have any sort of demographics with your statistics to tell you your percentage of women versus men that listen to your show?
Yeah, we're usually had been close to 50-50, skewing slightly more towards women generally. And
Nice.
we skew a little bit younger, like so like 20 to 35 is the bulk of our demographic.
Nice.
So yeah, it's important to at least be generally aware of some of those things.
You mentioned before that you were in the middle of a rebrand. I sense that your website would be central for any rebrand, and you've had experience with websites. You have a website. I've been to it. You also have a website that goes along with your media host, I think. So why don't you let me know what your tips and tricks of making a website are?
Yeah, so we're actually doing a huge switch right now to actually try to get away. Right now, I will just probably lay out what we have going on currently and some of the issues that we're trying to address because I think it's interesting. I think I'm probably not the only one podcasting with these issues. But so right now, we are just a kind of generic WordPress website. I've spent a lot of time going through and trying to optimize it, trying to make it fast, mobile accessible, since most people will view it on mobile. But the problem with WordPress is that WordPress and fast are not really synonyms. So we've kind of had a lot of issues with the kind of bloated WordPress environment. And it is really great and wonderful as a beginner. And there are definitely ways that you can, if you were just looking for a very simple static site, it's probably one of the easier ways to go. And kind of just over time, I've been able to tweak and add and do all of these different kind of things with our website. But the problem for us is we have also wanted to get a little bit more into blogging. Just on the side, we have a large portion of our audience. We just recently ran a listener survey as part of this rebrand to make sure that we were going in the right direction. And a lot of our audience really indicated to us that they wanted more analysis, more kind of in-depth information on what we're covering, which was a little bit of a surprise because I had always thought of us as kind of entertainment and education sort of as equal components, and our audience really indicated like, no, we don't really want to be entertained. We really want to know, we want some more of this education stuff that you've got stored up in your brain. So we're trying to focus a little bit more on blogging, trying to just kind of ramp up our site speed. And so I've been kind of migrating us over to Ghost, which is an open source content management platform. It is like a mix between static websites, Patreon, and Substack. And so it's pretty interesting to say the least. But so we are kind of interested in moving away from Patreon because we think we can fulfill what our audience wants better through this software. And also, we will not have Patreon taking their greedy cut of each transaction, which it really kind of eats at me over time. The
Yeah.
amount of software transaction fees we pay.
What is it now? Like 30% or something from Patreon?
It is not that much, but it feels like that much sometimes.
Okay. Fair. What are some of your favorite? Well, tell you what, just think of your show, think of the 3 years, and what's the first thing that pops to your mind on a favorite moment from your show? It doesn't have to be the best, but just one that pops into head as a favorite moment from your show.
I would say probably the first time that I was contacted by a publisher and given a free book. I thought,
Nice.
wow, I've really made it. We now deal with them quite regularly. Publishers contact us to place books and authors on our show, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, these are books that don't usually come with advertising budgets, and so we're not able to scoop up any of that. But hey, free books, and academics love free books. So that is really nice. And we also get to talk with some really interesting people. We got to talk with an author who was just publishing one of her new books, and it was a wonderful interview, and it was really kind of, you feel special when the publisher is like coordinating with you, because normally as a podcaster, you're the one that's always doing the coordinating. So, it felt nice to be the one that was, being courted for a change. It was, it was probably one of my favorite moments. I, again, really felt like, wow, someone sees me as being legitimate in this field, which is always nice to feel like.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a podcaster about hobby podcasting, I would assume that there would be more hobby podcasters that would approach us about wanting to collaborate on our show, particularly this show. And yeah, that's not necessarily the case. So I haven't made it as big as you have. So congratulations.
Well, it depends. I think for us, right, like we're the only one in the niche. So as these people are looking for places to advertise their books for free, it is kind of a no-brainer, I think.
Okay.
All they have to do is send us a review copy, and we'll devote hours and hours of research to their book.
Well, that's awesome. I know how to keep you busy then. Send you books.
Exactly.
Yeah. Aside from Patreon, is there anything else about the podcasting infrastructure of the industry itself of podcasting that you'd like to see changed?
That's an interesting one. I feel like because we're kind of indie podcasters, we don't have so much of this sort of this industry, I guess. But I do think there is kind of a drive to kind of place ads as soon as humanly possible. I know we are hosting on Red Circle now. We used to host on Anchor, and just the sort of way that Anchor allows just a very kind of smaller show to place ads. I think at that level you would ruin your podcast. I don't think people would listen through the ads. I think it would be annoying. And so I think that it's not an industry thing per se. It's maybe a personal thing. But I think as a community, we should really think about whether we want ads on our shows or, at what level, right?
Yeah, we don't want ads on our shows. We have made the decision not to monetize our shows. Maybe eventually with better podcasting, when we get a Patreon. I've toyed with it for my hobby podcast, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., about the Marvel comic universe, but I have not pulled the trigger on any of that. And it's one of the things that I liked about podcasting in the very beginning is I was listening to satellite radio because it had, at the time, the swath of different channels that you could listen to that you couldn't get through radio. Like radio is very specific to your locality, and there's not really enough of an audience to sustain very niche stuff. Like if you want to talk about sci-fi or literature or something like that, you're not going to get a station to do that 24/7. On satellite radio at the time, there was sports, all-time sports, there was comedy, and there was a few other things, but there really wasn't anything that was speaking to me. Then in 2007, started listening to podcasts, and I found some things that I liked and niches that I liked. And one of the main things that I liked about podcasting back then is there were no ads, because if you listen to the radio, there was maybe 35 minutes of every hour that was content and about 25 minutes that was ads. It was really grating to me. And I realized that they have to make money to stay in business, but it was an excessive amount of ads, in my opinion. And I just wanted to listen to like a book on tape or whatever. And then I found podcasts, and it was basically a book on tape back then, but very specific, intimate conversations with somebody. And like you said, it was like listening into somebody's conversation at a bar in your case. And without ads. And I was like, this is it. This is the maximum enjoyment that I'm going to get. And then fast forward the 15 or so years, and you're seeing people like, I have to monetize. I want to make money with my show, either as a side hustle or I want to try to go full time with this. And the way to do that is people do ads. And I'm like, then you're just not the podcast for me. There was one podcast that I listened to, and it's a daily technical podcast. So I'm getting the daily technical news, but it's like a 5-minute podcast. Some days there were more than 5 minutes worth of ads on this 5-minute podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is annoying. This is very, very annoying. So I won't listen to it unless I can press the skip button. And it's just, I guess, the way things are going. I'm going to be very, very sad the day that the skip button no longer works.
I think I do think that's coming. I think that I'm not that old, but I do in my short time here on this wonderful planet, I feel like I've seen a lot of things that I've liked be ruined by ads. And that's kind of the way that the model is going, not just with podcasting, but with pretty much all entertainment, all media. You know, if a company can't place ads on whatever it is, then they're going to really try to find a way to, restrict you and funnel you into some way for them to advertise to you. So it's happening with video streaming. I'm assuming that's what's going on with Reddit. I haven't been following it that close, but I think that's what a bit of it has to do with. And yeah, so I don't want to be one of these things that somebody thinks, I used to love Tipsy Tolstoy, and then they ruined it with ads, because I would feel really bad about that.
So do you go to movies at all in person?
Yeah, every now and then.
Yeah, so I just went to a couple of movies in theater. I saw Across the Spider-Verse and I saw Guardians of the Galaxy. In each case, there were more than 30 minutes worth of ads from the time that the showtime was supposed to start, that they advertised start, to what the time the movie was like a half an hour. And if you're used to this, you can just come late, especially if you have seats, right? The pre-season, you don't have to worry about finding seats. So you can come late. Sometimes you want to see some of the trailers that they show out, but it's more than trailers. It's like, it's just a constant advertising barrage for you, even before the start time, for 30, 45 minutes or whatever. That gets annoying to me after a while.
So I did have a good advertising related experience when I went to see the new Spider-Man, which was that in the theater we were at, the screen, they were having some sort of technical issue. Okay. So it started about the normal lateness, but it was because they were trying to fix the screen, so there was nothing playing on screen. It was just black, and it was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you said you were doing a rebrand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking for any inside information. Usually I ask about what future plans are. If you want to talk about the rebrand, great. If not, no problem. But is there anything that you would like to state about the future plans for your show?
It's going to be very different, but very much the same. The core of the show is going to be pretty much the same. It's more of an aesthetic rebrand, I guess.
So you're still talking about 3 shows a month or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's what we kind of found for us, is where we are going to be staying, is about 3 shows per month. I would love to be a weekly podcast, but for us, really, it's a lot of reading and it's a lot of research. And we're looking at doing kind of more research, because our show at the moment is split about 50-50 summary and discussion. And our audience has kind of indicated what we were feeling like, which is that you can find a summary online. You don't need us to summarize it for you. We really want to be focused on, explaining why this is important and, impactful and meaningful. And that's kind of what we see as the main value of our podcast. And so we're trying to focus in on that and kind of hone that aspect of our show and just kind of make it the best that it can be. And the aesthetic rebrand is just so people can more easily find us, and so that, our website is more functional, just all these kind of things that we were feeling like, it's time for a little bit of a shakeup.
All right. So we had some comments in our chat in the live stream here. Do you want to go over some of the questions that people asked?
Sure.
Okay. The first one is actually my co-host from the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast, or one of the three co-hosts, Chris. He asked, what would you recommend reading for somebody who wants to learn Russian?
This one is my kind of controversial one, but I always think actually that Tolstoy is in a lot of ways not that difficult because his chapters are very short. And so you can get like a lot of 3-page chapters in these giant novels. Besides the kind of 19th century vocab that you're going to get in general, I would say it's not too bad. That or Chekhov, so I've been told, is pretty easy for beginners.
Okay. Yeah, I remember reading my French literature, and while it did help a little bit in my learning French, actually going to France, really, I mean, that's how you do it. Just go wherever you want to learn the language and immerse yourself for a week or so.
Yeah, that was the most helpful for my Russian, but not everybody, at the moment it's not exactly the easiest place to go.
No, it's not. I wanted to stay away from that. But pre-pandemic, pre-war, you did spend a lot of time in Russia, and
Yes.
I assume that helped your Russian language.
It did.
Okay. Liberty Dude in the chat said, did you find staying active on social media, creating an active community, helps build the desired word of mouth of growth, or just help the podcaster keep motivated to keep pushing on?
A little bit of both, I would say. It kind of, I think that we found some really good, like, a core group of people on each of our social media platforms that have kind of helped us propel our growth. But then whether that is working in terms of word of mouth, you may never know because you can't track word of mouth, which is why I said it's the most frustrating way to spread. But I do think it is the most not efficient, but it's the best. It's the strongest, I would say. That being said, I do find these social media interactions do keep me kind of going. Social media plus, I would say, Discord. We get a lot of good insights or comments in our Discord that are pretty fun. So,
do you play outside your show's Discord server, or do you just kind of focus on your singular Discord server for your show?
We're mostly just focused on the one for the show. But inside our Discord, it's not all Russian lit. It's kind of just general shenanigans. We do, kind of community events. And we have, like I said, we have a lot of people that have been around for like multiple years at this point. So it's good to see.
Good to see indeed. And also Chris, my co-host from Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. say, hi, background dog. I saw you back there being super cute. Please come back. So I think your dog read this comment because he came back and is in the chair behind you.
Yeah, that's Alfie. He heard a noise outside when I was talking about advertising and almost lost his mind, but now he's safely returned to his spot. Which is, why my pillows on my chairs don't look like normal pillows. This one does. This one is Alfie's spot, which is why it is in dog bed mode.
Oh, I see. Dog bed. But so I also have a dog. Actually, it's my daughter's dog, and it's a 100-pound golden retriever. We actually got these pet covers for our furniture in the great room there where the dog can sit on. And I actually got multiple ones so that every week we take it off and we launder it and we put the new one on, kind of like sheets on a bed sort of thing. And it's worked great. So it saved our furniture.
Yeah, we spent a lot of money getting so we have a big green couch in our living room, very comfortable. Dog liked it. So we got a smaller version of it that we found just on like Chewy or wherever. And it is very comfortable because he likes that rounded back that he can kind of curl up into. And so we spent a lot of money getting him that, all for him to not want to leave the couch next to us.
There you go. All right. It has been a pleasure talking to you this time, and I really appreciate you coming on. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah. And if people want to hear your Tipsy Tolstoy musings, where can they find you?
TipsyTolstoy.com. Our website's got everything that you need. It's got all my links. It's got the show's links. TipsyTolstoy.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for spending your time with Matt and myself over the past hour. If you'd like to connect with content like this, please subscribe to the Better Podcasting YouTube channel and like the video. Ring that bell. Or if you are listening to the audio version, give Better Podcasting Chats with SP a follow on your podcatcher app of choice. Stephen and I would greatly appreciate it. Season 3 of the main Better Podcasting show concluded a couple of weeks ago, and Season 3 of Better Podcasting Live Chat is now underway, discussing all about your hobby podcast audience and your general topics as well. Check both those shows out at betterpodcasting.com. My next show here, Better Podcasting Chats with SP, is scheduled to stream live on July 18th. However, if you'd like to join me before that or after that, drop me a line on social media, or my email is stargatepioneer@betterpodcasting.com. We'll look at a date to have you on the show. I'll send you a schedule link from Calendly. In the meantime, you can join the podcasting conversation on our Discord server, betterpodcasting.com/Discord. You can find both Stephen and myself there every day. And if you are a geeky related podcast, you can consider becoming part of the Gonna Geek Network. You can apply at gonnageek.com/joy. We'll see everybody next time.